Hello and welcome to the OP Overwatch Podcast. I'm your host Jam and I'm joined by my co-host Jeff. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm hanging in there, reeling from the recently announced Genji changes, but how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm a little more focused on some of the other exciting announcements, but let's definitely get into all of that because we have had a lot of balance updates, a new map has been announced. There's a lot going on right now.
Yeah, we'll start with the map, I guess. Try and keep it upbeat right off the bat here. The map is good news. I'm sure that I will be mispronouncing it today and always, so we're going to call it Eichenwald. I know that's wrong. Please forgive me.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It looks incredible. Really exciting. I mean, it's the first map since launch, and it looks awesome so far. We saw the preview video, and I saw a few minutes of gameplay on it coming out of Gamescom. I mean, it's got this look of like a war-torn village with a castle in the center, and it definitely looks like there was some sort of huge battle that had taken place there, and maybe it has not been inhabited since then. So I love the look and feel of it right off the bat. What did you think about that?
Yeah, Eichenwald is extremely exciting for me because with the announcement of that map, we finally have a map that's actually a little less high-tech. You know, we had a lot of cities like Kings Row and Numbani, but it's nice to see a map that actually takes place in a literal castle. I mean, it's a castle and a village right in the middle of Germany, and it's apparently a point of major storyline in the Overwatch universe. So, yeah, Eichenwald is the home of Reinhardt, who, as we've talked about before, he is the giant tank knight of the Overwatch crew. And it is ridiculously cool looking because it looks to be there is an outside village section complete with a clock store and, these really, really cool looking German village buildings and things like that. And then the path of the payload apparently travels up through this village until it eventually hits this really, really awesome looking multi-level castle. The payload itself has a battering ram on it, which apparently is going to knock down the front door to the castle. So my thought is that will probably be a capture point halfway through the map. And then after you do that, it finally works its way through the castle into the final throne room where you see from what I've read, it is the head of the Crusaders. It was a king of this group of knights essentially in Germany. And if you kind of look at his armor and everything, it all is very, very reminiscent of how Reinhardt looks. So a lot of cool details and visual things that are kind of tying it all together.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in there and get to really check out. I know that a lot of times they put little details in the map that when you get a chance to explore it, you can really appreciate stuff like that. But yeah, I love that it's a hybrid. I think the hybrid maps have become, over time, my favorite map type. I'd say, like, at launch, for example, I think I definitely leaned more towards, like, Control Points or the King of the Hill maps. But I'm a big fan of the hybrids now, and so I'm excited that this is in that category. And so, yeah, I mean, it looks like you capture the battering ram, and I'm sure they'll give us a reason why we're knocking down the door to the castle. But yeah, the checkpoint is going to knock the door open, and then you proceed into the throne room. So it looks really awesome. I'm excited to get in there and check it out. And, we'll definitely have a little bit more detailed Eichenwald discussion once we've had some hands-on time with the PTR.
For sure. Yeah, at the time of this recording, they actually just recently announced the map. So I'm sure by the time it comes out, hopefully there'll be a little more info out. I'm really, really excited to jump in and play with it. It looks to be a very diverse map. There's really, really steep changes in elevation from certain guard towers to areas around the village. And once you get in the castle, it looks like it kind of switches to more close quarters combat until you get to the final throne room. So right now, there are people playing it at Gamescom as we speak, and I'm really, really looking forward to jumping in and playing that map. So yeah, very, very exciting. I always welcome a new map, and this one looks great.
Yeah, and just really quickly, I mean, you mentioned there are people playing it right now. I've seen a few videos go up and a few people offering some commentary. It sounds like the map is going to be ideal for characters like Ana or snipers. It sounds like it's got some long sight lines, especially at the beginning when you're out in the village. So I'm really excited to see if that affects the meta and brings certain characters into the fold more. Well, only time will tell. But speaking of the PTR, there is a a lot of balance changes coming with this patch that just got put up on the PTR this morning. And so I know sometimes they'll make changes to the specific numbers, but just speaking generally, I wanted to cover a few of the characters that are being rebalanced. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So really quickly, I mean, first of all, I'm sure you're thrilled to see that Mei is indeed receiving a buff. Looks like they're going to change something with the mechanics of her Blizzard where it'll go through barriers, increase the range a little bit. Do you think that's what Mei needs?
Yeah, Mei's a really tricky one because her kit and just her abilities are so much different from everyone else. I mean, she's listed as a defense character, but she really is kind of a hybrid character because I've always said you can play her as almost a pseudo-tank with the combination of her wall and cryo freeze. She has the ability to survive quite a bit. I've found myself taking on 4 to 5 people at once a lot of times, just holding the payload until my team gets back, and it absolutely is possible. But then at the same time, she's not too bad at fighting one-on-one either. Being able to freeze you and take a icicle headshot is an excellent way to get rid of some of the lower HP characters. But as we mentioned before, she wasn't really getting a whole lot of playtime on the higher level players and what we see in the meta. And I think their kind of fix for that was adjusting her ultimate, which is an interesting choice because they actually apparently made a reference to how Reinhardt's ultimate is something that is almost instant and very easy to land. But then something with Mei, if people are familiar enough with Mei, you could still catch people in it. But if you're really, really wise to what she's going to do, it's pretty easy to avoid. So when they say that the Blizzard is now going to go through barriers, what they mean by that is before, if you held up Reinhardt's shield, it would still go through because it's just an area of effect. But now what it's going to do is the actual projectile that she throws, which is Snowball, the little drone that she carries around with her, is actually going to be able to go through barriers as well. At least that's how I interpret it. So that's pretty cool because now if you have a Winston shield or a Reinhardt shield, you're going to be able to just go right through that. Not quite sure how it's going to affect D.Va's defense matrix. My thought is that it'll probably still eat it because that seems to be a benefit of that shield. But on top of that, they're actually going to increase the range of effect as well. So I think it's something along the lines of an additional 2-meter circumference. So we're going to be seeing a wider area of effect on the Blizzard, and the projectile is going to go through shield. So I think that's a pretty cool buff for her. We'll see how it really affects during gameplay because I feel that the trick with Mei, or at least one of the problems with Mei, is that the second she starts getting teamed up on, it's almost impossible to win. I mean, that's where you really lean on the wall and the cryo freeze. But she is a really, really viable character in my eyes, and if they feel that using the ultimate to make her a little bit more viable on the higher level I'm really curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think this might be the right change for her. At least it feels like an appropriate first step, because the problem in my eyes with Mei's ult is that it's a little too easy to get out of. So it's hard for me to guess exactly how going through barriers will affect everything. I mean, I guess maybe it's easier to get it right into the middle of the team instead of stopping it right at the front with Reinhardt's shield. But really, I think the increased radius will be a bigger deal. I'm sure that they did some testing, and that's the number where if you're stuck in the middle, you can't just run out, which is kind of the case right now. So, yeah, I'm interested to see if this is kind of the fix for her, because she's definitely... I mean, she kind of slows combat down, so you can't just buff her damage. She'd be way too powerful if she could freeze you and just 2-hit people. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Another change that's coming, looks like they are buffing Mercy's healing output and her ultimate a little bit. Seems like they're going to reduce the amount of time before people can start moving and fighting after they're rezzed. The feeling is that will help Mercy, because people will be able to rejoin the fight quicker, and so Mercy won't essentially be standing there for 3 seconds just waiting for her allies to come back and help her. And I think that's kind of a creative way. That thought never occurred to me, but I kind of like this change. Just it feels a little bit more outside the box, but I mean, I could see where they're coming from with it. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, there's definitely been situations where I've been raised by Mercy and then immediately get killed again afterwards, just because you kind of have that window of time where you really can't do anything. So, of course, the enemy team, if they're taking over the point and they see everyone's getting rezzed, they're going to point at the highest priority target, usually another healer or a damage dealer, and just take them out immediately, especially if they have low HP. So I think knocking down the amount of time it takes for your team to actually start moving around and fighting again is a great way to do it. I do think even more dramatic is the increase on her healing, because it looks like it's being increased by 20% for the healing per second. Now, mind you, and I did want to mention this up top, now this is all notes for the current PTR that's out. The PTR is only available to PC players, so if you play on console, you actually won't get a chance to try this out until it's finally released. So when it is released, all of these numbers we're talking about may change, so take it with a grain of salt. This is more of a experimentation and Blizzard trying it out in the community before they put it out live. But, back to Mercy, I feel that the 20% healing increase is pretty huge, because she already was the fastest healer in the game on a single target. So to increase that even further, if you just look away from the numbers for a bit and just look at it as far as, okay, so what is the benefit of a faster healing? Obviously, you'll be able to keep people alive and get them to full life. But what I kind of noticed with that is if you're able to heal people faster, this is going to allow Mercy to switch from target to target a lot quicker. If you're not spending all your time on the tank, trying to keep them alive while everyone's shooting at them, you've already got them at full health, you can immediately start switching to some of the other targets. So this is going to keep Mercy mobile. It's going to allow her to consistently target different people on her team without fear of leaving them with too little life. And in turn with that, keeping her mobile is going to make it harder to hit her, because she's going to be able to basically bring you to full life and immediately jump to someone else. So in conjunction with her other abilities, I think this will be an interesting way to kind of buff her through the abilities of her allies, keeping her alive. Is that going to completely erase the frustration of getting targeted first and having to run maybe half of the match running back to your team? Not necessarily, but I think an increased heal may change that a little bit, and I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think they can do much of anything to change the fact that Mercy is the number one focus target, because her ult is still res. If anything, it makes it more important to kill her first. But there's not a way around that. It is how it is for Mercy. But I'm not surprised to see them buff her, because for one thing, we've talked about this a little bit before, but she's the only healer that can't do any damage really, or is only focused on healing. And I'm not sure that they necessarily want anyone to be a must pick, but if Mercy doesn't feel viable at all, I feel like she's one of the characters that's going to get brought back pretty quickly. I think part of the reason you've seen a bit of a slide with Mercy, aside from Zenyatta being almost a must pick right now, is that it's kind of a domino effect. Zenyatta's in the game, McCree is back, and so therefore it's a scary proposition to pick Pharah right now, and Pharah pairs really well with Mercy. So, small changes to one character just kind of, cascade down the line. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And actually, the next change, you called it in our last episode, looks like they're going to be bringing Orb of Discord down. It's seeing about a 20% reduction in effectiveness, so you called it. Of course, those numbers could change a little bit, but at least as the starting point, you guessed that they would bring it down to a 30% damage increase. And I think that's probably the right call.
Yeah, Orb of Discord was absolutely melting tanks, as we discussed in our previous episode. And, with a 50% additional damage output to your enemies, that's no laughing matter. I don't know. I really enjoy where Zenyatta is right now, and it's kind of nice to have him on the field and be that sort of intimidating factor. But, as Blizzard mentioned, they felt it was maybe just slightly too powerful, and I don't completely disagree, but dropping it to 30%, which is a number that I think a lot of people felt that might be a fair number for them to drop it to, I don't think is necessarily going to affect him too much as far as people, okay, I'm not picking Zenyatta anymore. I mean, 30% extra damage is still 30%, and that's pretty decent. If anything, it kind of brings Zenyatta back to a balance of being, equal parts healer, equal parts damage dealer. It fits with his lore and the idea of the character being more balanced. So Zenyatta's a decent healer. He's definitely not the best as far as healing speed, but he was definitely outshadowing his own healing with his attack power. So maybe this is a way of bringing balance to him, kind of laying it all out with the other characters and making him still viable, but not someone who's just the second you fight, say, a Roadhog or someone with no way of shielding themselves, you go down. So yeah, that's a pretty interesting nerf, but on top of that, it looks like they tipped the scales on the other side. His Orb of Destruction, which is his main firing attack, the damage actually, they're testing an increase from 40 damage per orb to 46. So, an additional 6 damage per orb doesn't seem like much on the face, but when you consider how often you're throwing those orbs out, that might be a pretty decent way to balance out the character. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like an effort to offset the damage that Zenyatta himself will lose. Because the real problem is that, the Orb of Discord affects damage received from everybody. So I'm sure they're thinking that, while bringing the debuff down is appropriate, we don't want Zenyatta's damage to be dropped that much. It's not like he was... I mean, he can do some pretty good damage, but it's not like he was leading, every team in damage or anything. So it's just to kind of offset that, I think. It's still going to feel like a nerf for Zenyatta for sure. But that's probably... I mean, that's fine, because I think for a lot of teams, they were selecting Orb of Discord and just bringing Zenyatta along. The other big change, really quickly, Hanzo, seems like they're addressing some of his mobility problems. So, I mean, he looks like he's going to be moving faster when he's holding back the arrow to aim, and also his shots are going to travel faster. Now, the shots traveling faster, I'm really interested to get in game and see what that looks like. I mean, I'm curious if that'll make his shots feel a little bit less, wonky and random, which is what I think the problem with the character is right now, is you never really quite know if your shots are going to land.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of kind of maximizing the potential of Hanzo as far as being a sniper is concerned. One of the things with him, I felt as a sniper, is that when compared to a character like Widowmaker, who has a hit scan just instant the second you shoot, having an arrow that has some travel time is definitely something that, I don't know, it didn't seem as advantageous as just click and shoot and it immediately hits. So an increased projectile speed on top of being able to move a little faster, I think might make him a little more viable. And yeah, I'm not a huge Hanzo player, but that kind of interests me enough to want to jump in, play with him a little more than I do right now, and kind of see if the accuracy of the weapon goes up a little bit based on those changes. So I'm really excited about that. A couple other small things I'll mention as well. Once again, these could change by the time it gets released. It looks like that they are increasing the delay for D.Va's defense matrix by half a second. So before, when you let go of your matrix, it took half a second before you could use it again. Now it's going to be a full second. Little changes like this are always interesting, especially for abilities you use quite often. An extra cooldown. Maybe the shield was being utilized a little too well in the game, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see that. It definitely felt like something where you could click it on to block specific projectiles that were coming in. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a nerf. It's not a huge deal, but I think that the redesigned defense matrix was a really strong ability. So I'm not just surprised to see that at all. So the real change here that I saved to last, because I feel like I might need to vent about this, is they basically just murdered Genji. I'm so distraught about this. And I don't play Genji as much as I used to, but I mean, wow. His ult doesn't last as long. They adjusted some of the details around Swift Strike, and the big change is they are removing the double jump after a wall climb. So, I mean, this is a major mobility nerf, and my first reaction was that I just needed to quit the game for a while, but I'm coming back from the ledge a little bit. Talk me off the ledge, Jam.
Well, I think this is this is actually an interesting change that was completely unexpected, because I wasn't really hearing a whole lot of cries for nerfing Genji. And compared to all the other characters we just talked about, this is the most substantial. I mean, not being able to reset your double jump after climbing, the Swift Strike no longer interrupting melee attacks. This is a tough one. I know I'm usually the one that's more on the positive side of things, and really the most positive thing I could say about this is maybe it won't all go through after the PTR, because we weren't really seeing a whole lot of Genji play high level as far as I know. So yeah, this is highly surprising, and also a dramatic drop in his ultimate, the Dragon Blade. They're going to be going with a 6-second duration instead of a previous 8 seconds. So now he's not even going to be having his Dragon Blade out a whole lot. So yeah, man, I normally would like to disagree with you, look on the positive side, but even as someone who's not a major Genji player, I mean, I think that was highly surprising.
Yeah, I'm just completely shocked by this. I mean, I know that there were some complaints out there. I mean, there's been a lot of other factors that have gone into it, though. Like, yeah, his ult was really strong when you paired it with Nano Boost, but I mean, Ana's not being selected that much, so it's not like that was happening every game. And I mean, his ult, he's vulnerable the whole time. He's got to run up to everybody. It's not like he just needs a quarter of a second to get it off, and then everyone's dead. So I don't know about that. I mean, this feels like an overreaction based on. I mean, there's been a few other changes. Like, I mean, Zenyatta, as I mentioned, has been virtually a must pick, and so his Orb of Harmony pairs really well with a Genji. If you put it on a Genji, it can become very, very difficult to kill him. I get that. And also, there was some minor tweaking with the projectile sizes a while back that apparently shrunk them and made it harder to hit people with virtually all of them, which is something that I don't really think they broadcasted publicly or wanted to shout from the rooftops, but it was done, and apparently that's being returned to its prior state. So between the projectiles getting apparently bigger again and Zenyatta presumably dropping off a little bit with the Orb of Discord nerf, I feel like Genji would have come back to Earth on his own if he was in an overpowered state. But it's not, I mean, he hadn't changed since launch. It's not like he's been a problem. So this feels like an overreaction based on maybe like the top 5 players in the world who are probably just wrecking people. But I mean, even like if you look at the meta for tournaments and stuff, like the large groups of pros, I mean, Genji was not being selected. I mean, certainly not as much as McCree, and really at about the same rate as Reaper and Tracer, and those characters are still allowed to play.
So, Jeff, just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, the notes from Blizzard in their patch notes basically say that Genji was a little too difficult to pin down, so these changes will balance out his speed. And they felt that Dragon Blade's duration was so long that it felt too difficult to reasonably counter on the other team. So apparently the mobility that he had, maybe it was just one of those things where people felt like they couldn't kill him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, generally when I'm fighting Genji, or if I want to counter a Genji, I will most definitely go to a Mei or a Winston. I feel like the splash damage that they kind of throw out there without having to be Twitch perfect was more than enough to get him. I mean, he didn't seem invincible, but apparently this was something that was on their radar. So we'll definitely see how it goes out in the PTR. I think we might see a reasonable drop-off in people playing him, but who knows?
Oh, I would be surprised if we see Genji being played at all. I mean, this is going to be... I'm honestly going to be shocked if this makes it live. And if it does, I think they'll bring it back within a couple of weeks, because this is... I don't even know what to say about this. I'm very surprised.
You seem distraught.
I mean, yeah, his ult, okay, yeah, it lasts a while. You can hit him with a flashbang and kill him. You can hook him, and it can sleep him. You can pick Winston and just Tesla him down. I mean, he is not an uncounterable character like we saw with McCree or Widowmaker early on. I don't even know what else to say. I'm shocked.
Let's just move on from this topic, because I don't want to have to talk you off the ledge here. We'll see what happens. It's not permanent yet, but that was definitely the biggest change as far as character balancing goes. There's a few other little ones that, for Lucio, for example, they decreased his movement speed on his speed boost, so we'll kind of see what that does. And another generally change is that any ultimates that consume your meter when activated will now drain the meter more quickly. So really, this affects McCree the most. Every 0.25 second period, his meter will decrease. So what you're seeing is a faster decrease of Deadeye. So we'll kind of see how that affects. That's one of those weird, tiny little changes that I think may affect the game in a big way once we see it played a little bit. But as far as characters go, we're seeing a lot of changes. And another thing that we had mentioned in a previous episode, I actually wanted to bring this one up to you, Jeff, is that they made a change to a Watchpoint Gibraltar. They're getting rid of the first checkpoint. So anybody familiar with Gibraltar, the first checkpoint is usually when you go under that bridge area, and then the second checkpoint is shortly after you take a left turn and then you get to that main gate into the shuttle hangar. They're getting rid of the first checkpoint under the bridge area. So it looks like now the first checkpoint will be the gate to the shuttle hangar a little bit farther down the road. And this is kind of a change that they made based off of their previous extremely vague Watchpoint Gibraltar changes that they made just a little while ago. So just an interesting map change. That's really the biggest one, but I thought that was pretty funny.
My understanding is that earlier, like before launch in the beta, that checkpoint underneath the overpass did not used to exist, and that so like the shuttle hangar was the first checkpoint, or it used to be, and apparently teams were having a hard time pushing to that checkpoint, so that's why they added kind of the gimme checkpoint underneath. So, as usual, I defer to their statistics on this. I guess they're seeing that teams are no longer having an issue getting to that checkpoint, and so they're making an adjustment. I've got no problem with it. I've never had trouble getting to the first or second checkpoint, on a regular basis. So, whatever works for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're watching closely a lot of the maps and the progression of players. So, I'm really not opposed to it either. We'll see how that flows. Just having one less checkpoint, I don't think will change things too much. And then some more general updates. This is kind of a big one. When Symmetra activates her teleport, she actually now is going to report the number of charges left on her teleporter. So, when Symmetra puts out a teleporter, it has a limited amount of charges and then it disappears. If the enemy doesn't destroy it, it'll disappear after a short time. And now she's actually going to call out how many charges are left. I feel like that's a pretty cool addition to make her a little more viable, have that team communication that you don't have to depend on in the actual chat. And also, when a player activates the needs healing communication when targeting a teammate, so you actually have to point at the teammate and say, I need healing, the healers in the game will now tell allies to group up automatically. And then a marker will appear above their head, allowing teammates to locate the healer more quickly. So what we're seeing is these sort of automatic communication updates that are making it easier for you to know what's going on with your team without having to manually do it. I just had recently seen the change a while ago where your character automatically asks for healing without you having to do it manually. And I feel that does help as a healer as well. I play a lot of Lucio, so it's good to know where they are and who needs healing. So little things like this, I think, are really going to help the general flow of the game and make you focus more on the task at hand instead of trying to get your message out there.
Yeah, these feel like kind of small quality of life changes, but I do think this could be pretty helpful, especially I feel there's a lot of sentiment out there that queuing up for quick play by yourself is a bad idea. Like, people just don't have a good experience getting put in games with a large group of people they don't know. And obviously communication is going to be scarce in those scenarios. So, if they can put little things like this in the game that essentially automate the communication to some degree, I think that'll be helpful. It's going to feel like a small change, but I mean, just little things like that could make it a little bit more enjoyable. And, on the higher end, I guess Symmetra calling out like a teleporter, I've got one charge left. If you got two people that just rezzed, maybe the first person, that rezzed isn't the healer, and he knows I'm going to let Mercy go through first. So, little things like that where it could make a difference. So I'm a fan of it.
Most definitely. And then lastly, I just want to add, we all love unlockables. It looks like they added, for some of the characters, at least one, but for most, 2 new emotes. Everybody now has a sitting emote and a laughing emote. So that'll just add on top of the getting play of the game. You can now take a seat or laugh at people as well. Go through the hero gallery and check them out. I personally like Diva's sit one, where she actually does drop down, a screen projects in front of her, and she starts playing a video game, kind of a greatest video game, while munching on what is clearly some form of Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew. It's not those brands, but if you look at the color of the can in the bag, Anybody who goes online and sees anything about D.Va, people seem to like to relate her to the Major League Gaming, Doritos and Mountain Dew, so looks like Blizzard is jumping all in.
Yeah, that hits a little close to home.
So let's go ahead and jump into our character breakdown. We are going to hit the last tank that we have left. Let's talk about Roadhog.
Welcome to the apocalypse.
So Mako Rutledge, a.k.a. Roadhog, is a ruthless killer from Australia. He is most popularly known as the partner and bodyguard of Junkrat. And he has a pretty interesting lore himself. Basically, in Australia, and we may have mentioned it briefly in the Junkrat episode, there was a lot going on in the Omnic Wars all around the world, but Australia and the Sydney area was hit pretty hard during the Omnic Wars. And after the war ended, Australia actually gave a section of land in the country to the Omnics as sort of a sign of peace. So when this happened, unfortunately, a lot of the humans that lived there and the Australian natives were displaced and kind of put into areas of the country that they didn't want to live in, and this created a lot of strife between the human and Omnic relations. Roadhog is one of these people, and he ended up joining a rebel group that went against the Omnics. There was all sorts of conflict, and ultimately, with all the explosions and the bombing and the radiation, it turned a good section of Australia into a wasteland. So think Mad Max, except with a flavor of Overwatch. So Roadhog is a character who kind of grows up in this rough landscape. He's got a gas mask to kind of filter out all of the radiation and the particles in the air. So this is one tough guy, and he is mean. He's a very interesting character in the story, but in the game itself, he's very, very cool because he's, once again, massively different from any of the other characters and any of the other tanks.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Roadhog. I'm really glad a character like this is in the game. As you said, he's pretty unique mechanically. I think he's a lot of fun to play. I think he can be a little bit frustrating to play against at times. And as he is right now, I think he suffers from a little bit of an identity crisis with regard to his role on the team. So what I mean by that is he's not really a tank in the traditional sense. He doesn't block or absorb any damage. He's more of an attack tank, I guess, because he has a large health pool. But yeah, I think he's kind of ideal as maybe an off tank behind a real tank. I don't know. What do you think about that? You like where he is right now?
No, I see what you're saying. I wouldn't completely agree that he's not a tank, but once again, when we start having conversations like this, we're getting into semantics. But, I mean, a tank is, in this game, and I feel a lot of people feel a tank is anyone with a high HP pool. But I don't think it's just that. And more to your point, I think a tank's role is to be the center of the team, be the one taking the hits and surviving through them. And in this respect, I completely see where you're coming from. I feel Roadhog is probably the easiest tank to kill, mostly because he doesn't have any way of shielding himself. His mobility is very lackluster. And this is kind of balanced out by him having the highest HP pool and then having the biggest self-heal in the game. Which we'll get to when we talk about his abilities. So, yeah, as far as being a tank is concerned, I'd have to agree with you. I think it is a little misleading to think that if you do have Roadhog as your main tank, what you want is you want a comp and you want a team that is going to be very, very focused on keeping him alive. Because when he does self-heal, he's not able to do anything else. He's not able to run around. So the second I see a Roadhog on the map, as any character, I immediately start piling on the damage once I see other teammates are as well. So we'll kind of get into his strategy and everything, but yeah, him being a tank, if he is a tank, he's what I would call an attack tank, and he is most definitely the most dangerous tank in the game as far as attack power goes.
Definitely the attack part of it he lives up to. I mean, he does a high amount of burst damage. Again, I see why he's classified there because of his large health pool, but I'm more looking for, like, when I think of the role of a tank, it's more like a Reinhardt or a Winston, where you're using some mechanism to shield your allies. You know, if you're playing Mercy, you don't want your only tank to be Roadhog because they're not doing anything to save you. Aside from just trying to hide behind his large hitbox, there's not much else he can do for Mercy.
Well, let's break down his abilities and let our listeners decide, and maybe they'll have an idea of where he kind of fits in the role. Because we have seen, at least previous to the release of the game, characters jump from one role to another based on the change in their abilities. So let's go ahead and start with his main attacking weapon. Roadhog has this really cool scrap gun. And the scrap gun is this sort of cool-looking spiky gun with a chain on it, and obviously some sort of homemade gun. And it is a really, really strong shotgun, essentially. It's a one-handed gun. It has a max of 4 ammo. So what we have is a gun, the only gun in the game with the lowest ammo out of all of them. You only get 4 shots. It fires 1 shot per second, so not very fast at all. And as far as damage is concerned, the scrap gun actually shoots out pellets like a shotgun. So it does about 4 to 9 damage per pellet, and 25 pellets per shot are what shoot out and kind of spray into the enemy. So this does suffer from fall-off damage. So it's one of those weapons where it's going to be super, super effective close range, but even at close range, if a lot of your pellets don't hit home, the damage might not be that effective. So you really, really, really want to be on point with it.
Yeah, shotgun is a great description of this. I mean, it's very, very similar to like Reaper or Diva's attacks in terms of mechanics. So you got to be right on them, and if you are, you can almost one-hit people. But from anything beyond melee range, he's going to struggle a little bit. Fortunately, he has an alt fire and an ability that can help with that problem.
Yeah, his main fire will do a max of 225 damage if every single pellet lands. So once again, if you're on point, that is a ridiculous amount of damage. But the alternate fire of the scrap gun is actually really interesting, and I don't think it's quite obvious how it works. So really pay attention to this. The scrap gun ball is the alternate fire. So what it does is it will fire instead of firing your normal shotgun blast, it'll fire a really tight-packed ball of scrap, and it'll travel just a little bit in front of you. So a few meters in front of you, this ball will travel, and then that ball will explode. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it essentially can do the same damage as a normal shotgun blast. However, it's all about distance. So when you're shooting the alternate fire, imagine Roadhog taking a few steps forward and then doing a normal shotgun blast. That's exactly what the scrap gun ball is. The catch to this is that if you use the alternate fire and the ball hits your enemy too early, it'll do minimal to no damage, and it'll basically be a useless attack and a waste of ammo. So the trick to the ball is you need to really memorize that perfect distance that it travels, and if you can get the ball to explode right in front of your enemy's face, it's the equivalent of doing a shotgun blast to the face with your main fire. So a tricky move because you have to get the distance right. If you're too close, it does almost nothing. If you're too far, the damage isn't super effective. It's like doing a shotgun blast from too far away. So a pretty cool way to kind of close the distance on your characters with Roadhog without actually having to walk up to them and necessarily be right in their face point blank.
Yeah, I think this alt fire is a really cool ability just because, I mean, it is a way to almost like change, where the character is, essentially. I mean, by firing it out and then it just kind of detonates like your main fire, but from, roughly 10 meters in front of you. It's just a really unique ability. And as you said, you've got to make sure that they're not too close or else it'll do almost nothing. So I would say playing around and getting a feel for the range of this is really the difference between being a good and a great Roadhog, because it can be pretty devastating at medium range once you really get the hang of it. I mean, just like you can one-hit people that are right in front of you with your main fire, you can almost one-hit people with the alt fire if you get a ball to split and burst right in their face from medium range.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives Roadhog a nice selection of different distances, both close and somewhat medium range, to really do some damage. But if anybody moves outside of that distance, you're thinking, oh no, Roadhog's useless. Not necessarily, because now we're going to move to his next ability, which I'll be upfront and honest right now, I don't think it's overpowered. I just hate this ability with all of my soul. Roadhog's Chain Hook is an ability that he can use to close the distance between an enemy and himself. The chain hook is exactly what it sounds like. It's a hook on a chain that he throws out. It goes out a range of about 21 meters, which is pretty far in Overwatch. And when it connects, if it connects, it'll take whoever it hits and pull them right back to Roadhog, Scorpion from Mortal Kombat style. So he'll pull them right in front and put them in perfect shotgun range. And on top of that, it'll actually stun them for a short amount of time as well. It has a cooldown of 6 seconds. It does 30 damage on the connection of the chain. And the stun time after the chain actually hooks is about 0.15 seconds, roughly. So it's not a long stun like McCree's stun bomb. However, it is enough of a stun to get a nice, well-placed headshot with his scrap gun.
Did you say the range was 121 meters? Is that right?
It definitely feels like it at times.
I've never outranged this ability. It hits me every time. Yeah, the hook is very frustrating to play against, but very powerful if you're playing as Roadhog. And yeah, the 6 second cooldown is really short, so I mean, it feels like it's up constantly. But as you mentioned, it's really good for reeling people in. I mean, you can essentially one-hit a 200 health point character, which is most of the characters in the game, by landing the hook and then just firing a shot, and for good measure, you can throw in a quick melee attack to finish it off. It's basically one-hitting most characters in the game at this point, so that's where the frustration comes from, is you get hooked and you know you're dead.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about this is that when the hook hits, it doesn't just pull them forward, but it actually turns the opponent towards Roadhog. So if he gets you from the back, for example, he'll pull you and then you will rotate 180 degrees and face him. So it kind of adds to the intimidating aspect of his character, because not only is he this huge hulking figure who you can hear his footsteps, you can hear his sort of creepy gas mask breathing, but you can be nowhere near him, seemingly, and all of a sudden, in the middle of your gameplay, you just suddenly get stunned, and you turn around, and all that's on your screen is Roadhog, and then a shotgun blast to the face. So if you don't see him coming, it could be really, really frustrating. And his next ability, which kind of is a nice support to his tank role, is Take a Breather. So Take a Breather is an ability where Roadhog takes this sort of health gas tank, puts it into his gas mask, and he breathes it in. It has a duration of 1 second, so pretty short self-heal, and a cooldown of 8 seconds. So every 8 seconds, you have the ability to heal yourself for a whopping 300 HP. So Roadhog has a 600 base hit point pool already, which is the highest in the game. And he can heal half of that with an ability that's available to him every 8 seconds. So this is where the character kind of takes a turn towards a tank road. Granted, he's not shielding himself, but he has the ability to, at any point, heal half of his life every 8 seconds. And I think depending on how you play Roadhog, if you can find cover, if your team protects you, this is where the longevity of the character comes from.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. If you're fighting Roadhog and yourself playing a character that puts out like moderate to low damage, like a Lucio or something, it's almost impossible to kill Roadhog one-on-one because this heal is so significant. And the cooldown is short. I mean, both of his abilities have short cooldowns. I imagine that's in part to offset the size of his small magazine being only 4 shots. It would feel like he's doing more time reloading than fighting sometimes if these weren't on such short cooldowns. But because they are, it can feel really strong. I mean, healing half your health, it heals it pretty quickly too. You can even use it in combat. It'll usually out-heal whatever damage you're taking. So, you know, even if you've got a couple people shooting at you, if you're down to like 50 health, it's usually worth your time to use this ability. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge heal. It'll keep him going way longer than you think. He can be really frustrating to kill if you're not on the right character.
And on a related note, if you are playing a healer such as Mercy or Lucio or even Zenyatta, it is quite possible if you're not doing your job to lose out to the gold and healing to Roadhog because of that giant heal. So just keep that in mind for pride's sake.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
And Roadhog's final ability is his ultimate ability. His ultimate is called a Whole Hog. So Whole Hog is really interesting. He takes his main scrap gun. He starts cramming all sorts of junk into it, and then he puts a crank on the side of it and essentially turns it into a rapid-fire shotgun. So really cool ability. It actually lasts about 6 seconds. And it has a knockback effect, and it covers a wide cone in front of him. So this is essentially a way to clear a point to knock people off of ledges. Really good. The damage is not too crazy on it. Don't get me wrong. It will kill enemies. It actually does somewhere between, and this sounds ridiculous, 2,000 to 4,000 damage total. But this is all a combination of every single pellet that is on screen. So the pellets shoot wide, they shoot all over the place. You're not really going to land every single pellet unless you're fighting a tank in a corner and you manage to shoot them in the face with everything. And that doesn't happen often. But it is a great way to clear a point, and it's a fantastic ultimate ability for this character.
Yeah, I like this ability. It's fairly unique. And yeah, I mean, it's a huge channeled cone attack, so the knockback is definitely the key part of this, I think. It makes him really effective on certain maps where you can rack up some environmental kills with it. But yeah, I mean, if you can pin someone in a corner, the damage will wipe them out. But more often than not, you're pushing them away with the knockback so much that the damage gets mitigated. Keep in mind, though, he is slowed while he's using it, so he's fairly vulnerable to either somebody just killing him from out of range of the ult or getting flanked. You know, a McCree can flashbang and interrupt it. So it's definitely not overpowered. It has some weaknesses. You want to be very choosy about when you go ahead and use it.
For sure. So kind of looking at his abilities, that's his whole kit. He has a shotgun with 2 different fires. He has a chain hook. He has a self-heal. And he has his Whole Hog, which is a great way to clear points, do spread damage, and really cause chaos, which I think is fitting to Roadhog's character. So all that being said, let's talk strategy, because I feel there is so much to say as far as character pairings, playing as Roadhog versus fighting him, team comps. I'll let you start, Jeff. As far as your experience with Roadhog, what do you think are some interesting pairings as far as teams and counter picks for characters?
Well, I mean, just right off the bat, I think the bane of Roadhog's existence right now is Orb of Discord, because you know his health pool is huge, but if you cut it in half with Orb of Discord, he's still got the biggest hitbox in the game, and no portion of his health is like armor, so there's no mitigation from that standpoint. So he can get burned down pretty quickly by a character like Zenyatta being on the other team right now. I also think that a fairly new counter to him that can be a real headache is Ana, because if she hits him with her grenade, it will make it so you can't use Take a Breather. You can't heal from any, you know, no one can heal you and you can't heal yourself. So those are some pretty strong counters to him. And then I think, I mean, a character like Reaper, you know, Roadhog wants to get people in close, but Reaper wants to be close, and he'll do more damage than Roadhog up at point-blank range. And also, I think Reinhardt can be a headache. I mean, the shield will block all the enemies from being hooked, and he can be tough for Roadhog to take down one-on-one. So those are some characters that give me trouble when I'm playing Roadhog. I think he's just really, really strong right now, especially against, really any 200 health point character, but especially Pharah. Because it's really the easiest way to get her out of the sky is to just hook her down. And then I think he's really effective at pinpointing and taking out the supports on the other team. Any supporting character is going to be prone to the combo that I talked about earlier, where you hook them, fire one shot, and then melee. So you can really pinpoint and take out the other team's healer or healers at the beginning of every encounter. So yeah, you can really give the other team headaches in that manner by wiping out the supports right off the bat. What about you? What has your experience with Roadhog been?
It's actually very similar. Playing as Roadhog, I think it really comes down to that combo you mentioned, the hook, the shotgun blast into the melee. And to add on top of that, you can actually add an extra step in front of that. If you do your alternate fire at the perfect distance, then throw your hook, then shotgun, then melee, that's really going to maximize the amount of damage. There's not, I don't think, any characters in the game that can survive that combo or at least come out of there without needing to run away. So he has a lot of damage output potential. As far as being paired with other characters, I do agree. I think anybody 200 health points or lower should really be wary of Roadhog. In a situation like this, I'd normally say just stay out of his shotgun range, but that goddamn hook, it really is the problem. Because even as a tracer who's extremely mobile, if you're not paying attention, he gets you from behind. If you get hooked by Roadhog, you're basically gone. That shotgun blast, when timed correctly, can pretty much happen instantly after the hook. I believe the only characters at this point who can survive it are Reaper and Mei, since they both have abilities, both Reaper's Wraith Form and Mei's Cryo Freeze, that can allow them to instantly either escape or self-heal and be invulnerable and kind of avoid any other attack from Roadhog after the fact. But if you're Zenyatta or Zero Suit Diva and you get hooked, you're pretty much going down, and that is extremely frustrating. So be aware of that. Listen out for Roadhog if you're some of those lower characters. I think he really is tough against other tanks. The nice thing about him is his very quick burst damage, but if he can't kill someone immediately, like you said, he doesn't really have a way of shielding himself. He's not really mobile, so another tank can go toe-to-toe with Roadhog pretty well, or at least defend themselves from him. I think Diva is a great counter to Roadhog as far as a lot of his abilities are concerned. His whole hog, his ultimate, can pretty much be almost entirely eaten by Diva's defense matrix, which is pretty cool if you want to defend against Roadhog using his ultimate. Just stand up front with Diva and try to stay in front of him. He can't move very fast when he's using it, so it's fairly easy to do. Although I will say his hook can go through her defense matrix, which I am still not a fan of, but keep that in mind as well. And he's just going to be really, really good at, like you said, taking out supports, taking out low HP characters, and using cover to your advantage. The one thing I've noticed with him is that even though he does have the largest self-heal in the game at 300 HP, it is something that you want to do behind cover. When people see Roadhog, they shoot at him. He's one of the biggest hitboxes in the game, and he has no way of defending himself. So even with his self-heal, you can be healing out in the open and still go down the second the heal's over if the entire other team does focus on you. So map awareness is very important, knowing where the cover is, knowing how to get out of line of sight with him, which can be tricky because he's not super mobile. And also, going back to the combo you mentioned, a little trick if you don't play Roadhog or if you're not aware of it, when you want to do his chain hook to shotgun blast to melee combo, you can actually speed it up and make it as fast as possible by hitting the main fire button. So on a PC, it's your left click immediately after doing the hook. So even if the hook hasn't landed yet, the second you throw out the hook, you know it's going to land. Hold down that main fire. And once the hook has finished, it will instantly fire. So you don't have to try and time it and get that click. As long as you're holding that button down after throwing the hook, it's going to instantly shoot. And on top of that, once the shot happens, if you hold down the melee button right after shooting, that's going to instantly do your melee. It sounds a little complicated if you're not used to it, but when you use it and you get used to the timing of it, it actually dramatically speeds up the combo and makes it almost instant death for any low HP character.
That's a good point. I think maybe the first week or two of the game, I was playing Genji a good bit, and every time I saw a Roadhog, I had actually started to believe that there was enough time for me to get my deflect up between the hook and the shot, to the point where I was actively seeking Roadhogs to try and bait them into hooking me, because I was able to get the deflect up almost every time. But as people started to get better at the game, obviously with it being out longer and longer, I realized that no, there's not enough time to get deflect up if Roadhog knows what he's doing. So yeah, holding those buttons down ahead of time is a good way to make sure that there's no time for the target to either deflect or recall or ice block or anything like that to survive the combo. A few other tips. I mentioned earlier his ult can be really good for environmental kills, but the hook can be too, especially on maps like the Well on Ilios or the Sanctum on Nepal. You'll see Roadhogs go right up to the edge and then try and hook people, and so that it'll drop them. Once they get hooked, it'll just drop them down off the map. That's a really good way to wipe out. It's essentially one-hitting any character you do it to. So if you were able to get like the other team's tank or maybe a Mei or a Reaper that may or may not be able to survive the combo because they have 250 health, that's a good way to make sure they're going to die. So be aware of that. He's good, particularly good on those certain maps where you can take advantage of that situation. Another, just a general comment, I really like Roadhog on defense a lot. I think he's really good because of the hook and his health pool. He can kind of almost act as a disruptor. So you'll see the other team kind of gear up and make a push, and then all of a sudden Roadhog's pulling people out ahead of their Reinhardt or off to the side. So he can really make it hard for a team to stay grouped up and push as a unit. So he's really effective as a disruptor in that role. And then the last thing I would say, his hook, on top of just pulling people in, it is also a stun. So, it's really great for canceling other people's ultimates. You can hook a Pharah, a McCree, or a Reaper while they're ulting and save your team. So use the hook often, the cooldown's short, and it's really the ability that gets the entire kit going.
Yeah, that hook stun is huge, not only on ultimate abilities, but just on other abilities. If someone's doing a Reinhardt charge, for example, the hook can stop that and pull him out of his charge and, bring him to Roadhog as well. It's a great way if you want to be the hero Roadhog. If you see a D.Va ult, you can actually pull in the mech as it's about to explode to Roadhog. So if it's one of those things where you want to stay on the outskirts of the point, you see D.Va pulling in with her self-destruct, you could just pull it right away from your team and save them by pulling with the chain hook. So there's some really cool options. Definitely experiment with that hook. Experiment with the different combos of his abilities. Another few just little tips as far as survivability. If you're going to use his Take a Breather, like we said before, you cannot move when you're using it. You can basically just stand there and heal yourself, and it makes you a sitting duck. So one of the things that you might want to try with him is if you're trying to run back to your team, or if you're just trying to avoid fire, if you jump off a platform, not off a cliff, but just off a second level, and then activate it, it's only a 1 second. So by the time you hit the ground, you'll have your 300 HP, and you'll essentially be mobile because you'll be falling while you're healing. So that's a great way to kind of stay mobile and heal at the same time, and not make yourself open to combat. But I can't stress enough, guys, the biggest thing, I think, with Roadhog compared to other tanks, because he doesn't have mobility, because he doesn't have a shield, it's really going to be map knowledge. It's knowing where all the cover is. I think one of the greatest things a Roadhog could do is to stay in some of the more small areas of the map, the indoor areas where a lot of health packs are. Not only do you have health packs available to you, but you can kind of hide from the other team, take your pick on who you want to pull in with the chain, and the second you pull them in, now they're in a enclosed space with Roadhog, and that is not where you want to be if you're fighting him. It's a great way to pull people off the other team, keep yourself alive, have cover when you're using your Take a Breather. And I guess the next big piece of advice I'd give is to utilize his Whole Hog ultimate ability very, very carefully. I think it is an extremely useful ability when used correctly. It's not something you want to waste on just one or two opponents unless, they're the only ones on the point or on the payload. Communicate with your team. Having an Ana nano boost you while you're using your Whole Hog is great because it's not only going to increase your survivability, but it's going to make you move faster and do more damage with the Whole Hog. So essentially taking all the weaknesses of that ultimate and negating them even further. So really, really cool character and a lot of options, especially with different team comps. That's
a good point. Nano Boost is phenomenal to use with Roadhog's ult. One other aspect I don't really hear talked about a ton with Roadhog, but it's something to be aware of. I mentioned he's the only tank that doesn't block or absorb damage. He takes a lot of damage, but he's kind of built to take a lot of damage. But a side effect of that is that the other team will just love charging their ultimates on you. So while you probably can survive somebody shooting at you from a long range and just heal through it, you shouldn't give the other team free shots because you'll end up paying for it when they do push and everyone has their ult up. Whereas, another tank would have either stayed out of line of sight or had their shield up to block it or whatnot. So just be aware that even though he's built to take damage, you don't necessarily want to take all the damage you can all the time for no reason.
Yeah, don't give the other team target practice. That's not good at all.
Yeah. So just to kind of close him out, from a character balance standpoint, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where you think Roadhog is right now. I mean, do you like where he is? Do you think he's missing anything? Do you think that they'll be making any adjustments, either positive or negative, to him going forward?
This is a real tough one because just on a personal bias level, I absolutely despise his hook. There are arguments out there whether his hook is hit stun or not. I don't actually believe it is. I experimented with it, and it looks like that if you do shoot the hook slightly in front of someone, by the time it gets to that area, it will catch them. So it does feel really, really fast. So I feel like my gut reaction is nerf his hook, make it so it's not as easy to land. But the thing is, that's not really fair to a Roadhog player, because really that's what kind of pulls his kit together and really makes him an effective attacking tank. And on top of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you really don't see him being picked too much as a main tank on the high-level player scene. So I think that using him as an off tank, as a extra damage dealer, and someone with great survivability, I kind of like where he is right now. Knowing Blizzard and what they usually do with their characters that aren't being picked a lot on high level, he may get a buff in some way, but I think for the character he is, it's probably just fair for me to completely hate him when I'm fighting him and just know when to avoid him.
Well, you're right. You don't see him picked a ton right now on the high-end scene. I mean, I think he was being selected pretty regularly, but then when they buff Zenyatta, as I mentioned, the Orb of Discord and the size of his hitbox make it a real problem to be Roadhog against a Zenyatta. And also, for the short period of time where McCree had been nerfed to the point where you couldn't pick him, Roadhog's hook was really the only stun in the game. But yeah, between Zenyatta being selected almost all the time now and McCree being brought back, Roadhog's definitely suffering. And I think the reason is probably because, as I mentioned, he's really the only tank that doesn't really tank. So I think I might sound like a little bit of a traditionalist here, but there are two things I'd like to see them do to Roadhog. I'd like to see him removed from the tank class. Not from the game, but, he does nothing, as I said, to absorb or shield damage. Mei blocks more damage than Roadhog. Mei is more of a tank than Roadhog, in my opinion. I don't know if that would involve rebalancing him in some way to fit into the attack class. I'd be fine with that. Shrink the hitbox, increase the size of his magazine. I don't know. But, I like the idea of his character mechanics. I just, I feel cheated when I go into a game and, it's a quick play and it says, okay, you need a tank, and they pick a Roadhog. They didn't, it's deceptive. It's harmful to the team comp, in my opinion, because you don't really have a tank at that point. The other thing, you mentioned the hook. There's been a lot of debate about the hook. From my experience and what I've gathered in the community, there's a lot of debate about exactly how it works. You mentioned you don't think it's hit scan. To me, I think the problem is that the mechanic either is hit scan or is pretty close to it, but the animation is delayed. So what ends up happening is you get hooked around corners, you don't feel like you really got hit by it. And so I think just as big a part of the problem is that it's very frustrating that it doesn't feel fair. So they actually mentioned that in the patch that's coming, they're going to try and move people back. So like if you get hooked but you got around a corner, it'll move you back and then pull you straight to him. That feels more like a bug fix than a buff or a nerf. I don't know if that's necessarily going to solve the frustration problem. It's also possible that the server tick rate is at least part of the problem, and I know they've talked about rolling out improvements to the server tick rates gradually, and so hopefully that may alleviate some of the problem. But if it's not hit scan, then there's a good bit of aim assist going on with the hook, and I think what I really want from it is consistency. I want it to feel fair. So I think if they made the actual targeting of it line up with the animation where there's a delay, the hook goes out, and then if the person is where the hook is when it gets out there, then it hooks them, that would feel fair. But right now, I don't think it reacts that way, and so that's, I think, why it's so frustrating fighting against a Roadhog, because you get hooked around a corner all the time, and then you get one hit.
Yeah, and his hook missing the hook isn't really a huge deal because of its short cooldown. You can literally throw that hook again after a few seconds. So I don't completely disagree. I think that might be something to play with. But once again, it's going to come down to the stats that Blizzard's gathering, how the matches are turning out. The feedback is really important. So I think as a community, we definitely want to give as much feedback as possible to Blizzard on what we think of the characters, how the matches are sort of flowing. But all in all, like I said, a Roadhog to me is really, really frustrating when you get hooked, because for a lot of the characters I play, it means insta-death, and that's no fun. But if you're playing an effective Roadhog, maybe that's something that you like. So definitely give us your feedback. Let us know what you guys think. I think Roadhog, maybe not as much as a character like Bastion or Torbjorn, but there definitely is debate about the character and whether or not certain aspects of him are overpowered or he's not strong enough. Like we said, we're not seeing him used a whole lot in high-level play, so it could just be a matter of player experience and trying to be aware and avoid him as much as possible when fighting. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see where he goes. We really don't see any major buffs or nerfs coming to him that were talked about by Blizzard, but with the addition of new maps and characters every few weeks and rebalancing, who knows? So thank you guys very much for listening to the character breakdown of Roadhog. Once again, if you have any feedback, you can always reach us a variety of different ways. You can reach us on Twitter. I am at HappyJamOP, and Jeff?
I'm at TruthiterOP.
You can also reach us via email. That is happyjamop@gmail.com. We have our Facebook page as well. Just go on Facebook, search the OP Overwatch Podcast. You can hear this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all sorts of different platforms. And once again, if you do need to reach any of these links, you could check the show description notes on the podcast, and we'll drop some links in there for you guys as well. Let us know what you think. Thank you guys so much for listening. Our next focus are going to be some of the maps. We're really going to put a lot of focus on the map breakdowns. I'm really excited about this because I feel that there's a lot about the maps that many people might not know, and also a lot of cool tips and tricks based on what characters you're playing. So very, very exciting. Looking forward to talking to you guys next time. Once again, this has been the OP Overwatch Podcast with Jam and Jeff. Looking forward to talking to you next week.